Okay, so in the previous lesson we were able to pass some to-do items from the app to to-do list component. Then we mapped over the to-do items and we were able to pass each to-do item to a to-do item component, right? So in this lesson we are going to work on these different user interactions and basically allow our users to add a to-do, toggle a status for a to-do, delete a to-do, and then use these filters as well. Okay, so the first one that we should start with is going to be adding a new to-do. Okay, so if I come here, at the moment I've got this as a functional component, and we are going to be using the React hooks and sort of keeping it functional. But I just want to show you, for the benefit of those that haven't looked into React hooks system, how we would basically achieve that using a class, and then we will convert it into a functional component. So previously, whenever you would have a certain piece of state that you would need to keep a track of, you would have a class that would extend React.component, right? And then you would have a constructor which would accept props. Okay, and then to make sure, because it's basically inheritance, we want to make sure that the parent class, the component class, we pass the props through the super, so that, you know, for example, if you are using PHP, this would be like parent colon underscore construct, and then you pass the arguments. Okay, so then we would say this dot state, and let's do title. Okay, so that would be our constructor. Now, one of the methods that you were required to implement was render, okay, for each class component. So if I were to take this and just bring it here, okay, and format it a little, and that should work. Okay, so if I come back, refresh, yep, everything is working. However, now I have this title, right, as a piece of state that I can keep a track of and actually see if it changes, then do what I need to do. Okay, so that means, so let's bind our input element to this to the title. So the way we will do that is that we will have a value, okay, and that's going to be this dot state dot title. Okay, then React basically expects you to have these for two-way binding, to have these two pieces on any element. So that's on change event and value, right? So, and that's for the input element, of course. Okay, so here I actually going to be having access to the event, and then I can pass it along. This is going to, so this is basically an arrow function, and this allows me to pass the, or update the state, okay, without being worried about this being bound to not the component itself, but to undefined. Okay, so what I mean by that is that if I were to do something like this, I can't do this, this dot set state, because this is going to be undefined with a regular function. And that's why if you are using arrow function, then it basically allows you to bind your this to the component and not somewhere else. Okay, so I hope that makes sense. So if I say this dot set state, and I will say title is equal to event dot target dot value, okay, and we also want to make sure that when the user types a to-do item in the form or in that input element and presses enter, then we should be able to do something with it. So for that, we will be listing for a key down, and I will say that we are going to handle that using a method called enter. Okay, so let's create that method here. Handle enter. This is going to accept an event, and let's just console log the event itself. So if we save this, come back, open our developer tools here, go to the console. If I type something, yeah, we are getting the event. If we go back to our component here, so we have a bug in our code, but I'm just going to leave that for you to figure out, or we will see it in a minute. So here, what I can say is that if the key on the event is equal to enter, right, then let's go ahead and we will console log this dot state dot title, and let's see what happens, and we will see the bug. Okay, so if I were to now say hello, and this was the bug that I was talking about. So basically what had happened, that we have like this regular function, but that this keyword isn't bound to the add new to do component, but rather to undefined. Okay, for that reason, what I could do now is go ahead and make it an arrow function, and this will make sure that the keyword this is bound to the component and not to undefined. And that was exactly what I was trying to explain here. Okay, so if I come back now, refresh, type in hello, and this is undefined. Okay, so let's have a look. I think I didn't save my page. So if I come back, try it one more time, sorry about that, and this should work. So what we can do now is we can pass this title to the parent component and have the logic there to insert that to-do item or the title into the list of to-dos. Okay, so for that I'll come here and let's add a function. Okay, and I'll call it handle add to-do. You can call it anything that you want. Okay, this is going to be a function, and let's make this a const. Okay, and this is going to accept a title. Yeah, and then for now we will just go ahead and console log the title. So if I pass this, I'll say on add to do. So this is the prop that the child or the add new to do will receive, right? And let's call handle add to do here. So now if I go back to add new to do, and I can say here that this dot props dot on add to do, and I can pass the title, this dot state dot title. Okay, so if I come back here and type in hello, and we can see that the title is getting passed to the parent component. So this is how a class-based component would look like, and in fact we are going to transform our app.js component into a class-based component because of the fact that we are going to have quite a few things in there. Okay, so it's going to be a bit complicated, but if a component is this much simpler, there is no need for using the class-based component, right? It can be a functional component, and this is exactly where React introduced hooks, so that you can use the state and other lifecycle hooks in a functional component without having to resort to the class. Okay, so how would that look like? So let's start using the hooks. Well, I'm going to require use state. So we've got use state from React, and let's start transforming this component into a functional component. So let's just remove everything from here. Okay, and come down. We don't need the constructor. Okay, this will become a variable, a const variable with a function, so that can stay there. let's just remove the render there, so we can have just the return statement. Okay, so now, as we saw that we are still relying on title, which obviously needs to be in the state. So what we can do is we can say title and then set title, and we're going to get that from the React use state hook. The initial value was empty string for the title, right? Okay, so now if I come down here, that would mean I can remove this dot state from there, and this can become much more simpler here as well. Okay, so this would become set title, and there we go. Okay, and this will, we don't have to now, because we're not in a class scope anymore, so we can just call the function there. And with any luck, if we come back, refresh, hello, and we get undefined has no properties. Okay, so, oh yeah, because obviously we also need to now remove this and call it title. So one more time, hello, and yes, we get hello. So this is how a functional component would look like. Okay, and again, React hooks are the features that help you write functional component where you need to rely on a state but without any classes. That's pretty much it. Okay, so let's pass this title, and app will be responsible for inserting that title into the list of to-do items, right? As I said, we will be changing this into a class-based component, but for now, let's just go ahead and define a function, handle add to-do. This would basically receive a title. Let's just cancel out the title. And here we can pass that function as a prop. And again, you can call it anything that you want. I will just say on add to do and pass it the function that I've just defined. This now becomes a prop, okay, in add new to do. So that means here I can accept the props, or I can destructure as we talked about it earlier on, and I can say on add to do. Okay, come down here and just call that function like this. So with any luck, if we refresh, and on add to do is not a function. So let's see what happened. So this seems to be fine because we are accepting prop on add to do. Let me go back to the app. Yep. So the moment is saying that this is undefined. And you know what? I think I didn't save the file. I need to find an extension where it automatically saved the file for me whenever I move away from the editor. That's what I usually use. PHP Storm for the PHP development, and usually I get the editor to just save the file whenever I move away from it. Anyway, so it's working now as expected, right? So we're now accepting a title from the child component to the add new to do, and we basically have access to that here in the app component. As I said, we are going to change the app from a functional component to a class-based component, because we can still use this app being a functional component, but because we're going to have quite a few things in here, it might get a bit messy. So for that reason, I would prefer this to be a class-based component. So let's just change this component into a class-based component, and we'll go through exactly the same process as we did in the previous section. So I'm going to say it extends the component. Okay, and then we will define a constructor, and that's going to take the props. Okay, and we'll pass the props to the super. Oops, if I can spell correctly. Okay, and then we're going to have some state on this component, right? And the state will be to-dos, and that's going to be our to-do items. Okay, that also means we need to remove this, clean that up. We need to have a render method in here, and that will basically return all this. Okay, this now becomes this dot handle to-dos, and this is going to be this dot state dot to-do items. Okay, so I hope that we haven't broken anything. So if we go back and give the page a refresh, this dot state is null. Okay, so this is not set state, but rather this dot state. Okay, so one more time, to do items is undefined, and here we need to make that to do's not to do items, and looks like everything is back to how it was. Okay, great. So now that we have transformed this functional component into a class-based component, what we need to do now is basically add this to-do item to the list of to-dos. And to do that, let's just say const new to-do is equal to an object. Okay, the ID, we can go ahead and just create a random ID, right, using JavaScript. So nothing fancy there. mat.random, and let's do 10,000. So that will do. Okay, so we need a title, and the title is going to be the title. You can skip it and do something like this. Completed is going to be false to start with. Okay. So once I do that, then what I can say here is this dot set state. Okay. So one thing that we need to be really careful about in React is that we don't mutate the state. And what I mean by that is we just, we don't just go ahead and say array push or things like that, which would mutate the state. So what we need to do here, in fact, let me give you a quick example. So let's say we have const some items, and we've got this as an array, and let's say I've got now some other items, and I want to add an item to the array without mutating the original array. So what I would say then is that I'll get the original array, spread it out, some items, and then I will add 4. So now if I look at my some other items, and there we go. Okay, let me just make it a little bigger. So we managed to add a new item to the existing array without mutating the original array, and that's, I'm trying to explain here that we're not allowed to, because they can have some very unpredictable consequences. Okay, so here's what we will do. We will say const to do is equal to, we will spread out, and then we will append the new to do here. Okay, and then we can go ahead and say to-dos is, so we can say to-dos and assign the to-dos, but if the key value are the same, then we can just say this dot state and to-dos. Okay, if we come back and let me open the developer tools there, and let's add, there we go, it's working. Only problem is that we should really be clearing this out. Once I pass the title to the parent, then I can say set title, and this would be the empty string. So refresh, let's add a to-do, and it clears it out. Great. Okay, so now we have been able to pass a title from the child component to the parent component, and in the process we looked at functional component and class components. We've also been able to add the new to-do to the list of existing to-dos, and I think this video has gone a bit longer than expected, so we will finish off the lesson here. So in the next lesson we will start looking at deleting a to-do and toggling. We are going to go over things a bit more faster because we've taken our time, explain class-based components, functional-based components, how we can pass functions as props and then communicate between a parent and a child using functions as props, right? Okay, so I will see you guys in the next video.